crazy debt. And ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you join me in making that future a reality. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. I'd like to remind our audience listening at home that the Commonwealth of California. Our program tonight is the College Industrial Complex, which Michael Ellsworth, author of The Education of Millionaires. My name is Kevin O'Malley. I'm chairman of the Business and Leadership Forum here at the club and your host for tonight. So we have about 10 or 15 minutes for questions now. I would ask that you please do come up to the mic. Remember that we are video recording this as well. So Michael, I have one question for you. I'd like to start with. I read your book. I laughed more than I did tonight. What's the fun part of your book? What's the part to make us laugh and to make us feel optimistic when we leave tonight? If we buy your book.
The fun part is that there's so many people out there. In fact, a few of them are in the audience here right now that I know personally who are creating alternatives to this, and they're vibrant. They're passionate about learning. They're excited to create new systems to this pressing problem. And, you know, they're rascals, right? They're rebels right now. I don't think they're going to be rebels in 10 or 20 years, but right now it's a rebellion. And there's this society we constructed around the concept of the organization man. That book came out in the 50s that described pretty well the economy that we had in the 50s, these mass corporations, bureaucracies, organizations that basically wanted mass numbers of undifferentiated labor talent to become these organization men, and it was mostly men back then. And these people are rebelling against it right now. So there's just a wonderful cast of characters who are leading the revolution on this. I write about them a lot in my book, and they're out there. They're making this happen.
Yes. My name is Ben Konek, and I'm a social entrepreneur working on education. And my company name is M2Teach, Mobility to Teach. It's engaged to empower and inspire teachers, parents, and students for lifelong learning. That my thing is that the technology is going so fast and so quick that you're going to have to learn your whole life. You're going to maybe have to take a course. And there's a conference going on right now called the DML, Digital Media Learning, through a couple other universities, of people who really care about kids and students and getting teachers paid 2x, 3x more for a badging system, just like Cub Scouts, where you'll have a lifelong experience of learning.
Absolutely. I'm so excited about the concept of lifelong learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I wrote this book really because I realized that most of the things that I value in my life, my business, my writing career that I have now, learning how to bring resources in my life, doing what I love, also personal things, learning how to be in a relationship. That was definitely a learning curve. It's not come naturally to me, but I've learned a thing or two, and I'm happily married now. Learning about health. You know, my health wasn't that great in my 20s, partly from all the partying that I was doing in college. And so that was all lifelong learning. It happened after college. It happened informally, outside of formal institutions. Didn't typically spend a lot of money to learn it, but it was a lot of sweat learning. I put a lot of sweat and blood and tears into learning that. And we have this system, again, that is designed to pump out people credentialed for essentially middle management jobs in Fortune 500 companies. And so there's a certain amount of credentialing that has to happen to get those people into those jobs. So we've created a system where we front-load learning for the first 22 years until you're 22, and then you go into the job. But what if we had a system where young people weren't expected to get involved in this crazy educational credentialing arms race where they're expected to possibly have a master's or even a PhD and not enter the workforce till they're 30? What if they apprentice? I think that's a really important word, apprentice. Has a better ring than intern, right? What if they apprentice at a startup, starting at 15 or 16? 15 and 16-year-olds, if they're somewhat ambitious, somewhat bright, are certainly old enough to be apprentices in small businesses. So apprentice there and do book learning. I'm a writer. I will never diss book learning. I love book learning. learning. I write books, but I want to see this balance between learning the career skills starting young. Most of the people I write about started learning these things when they were 16. So they had 6 years on top of their peers. When their peers were 22 before they started figuring this stuff out, they were 16 figuring out the ways of the world, developing networks of employers and business owners that they know, and learning at the same time, a conversation between practice and learning. So yes, absolutely, I'm in favor of that.
Hi, I'm Pierre. So I basically agree with what you say, but I'm from France, so we don't have exactly the same problem, but we might go there. So there is lot of initiatives, like for instance, College, Seal Fellowship, which are good alternatives to the education problem, but that leads more to give greater awareness of the problem. But once there will be that awareness, what would be like the large-scale alternative to the problem? What is your take on that?
Thank you, yes. So first of all, a lot of this problem is an American-focused problem. We're the only educational system in the world that I know of that saddles young people with with $25,000 in debt when they graduate. It's different in other schools where you don't have to go into such crazy debt to get your education. But still, even without the debt, there's the time aspect. Not only the time in school, which is valuable time, between 18 and 22, the time that you could get what you need to know to hit the ground running. So your 20s are set for career-wise. So there's time being spent, which I think is largely to get these credentials in this credential arm race, which is wasted. So there's a lot of thought right now about what the alternatives are, and I think that it's going to focus a lot around the concept, as I said before, of apprenticing. I think we need to bring back the apprentice model, where people become apprentices, then they move on and they become what we used to call journeymen, then they become master. And we can have partnerships between business and our school system and even government can get involved in this, and we can have partnerships to create apprenticeship programs and have that, not that they're going into the dark satanic mill to never learn another thing when they're 13, right? But to be in the conversation of business starting young while they're also augmenting their book learning. I think not only is that the solution, but the solution is already starting to pop up. You did mention the Teal Fellowship, which is one small example. And there's many different programs right now. There's a whole phenomenon now called the incubator phenomenon. If you Google startup incubators, there's hundreds, maybe even thousands of these organizations that nurture entrepreneurial talent in young people. It's a new trend. I think that our education system is going to be moving largely towards that hands-on system. And for any entrepreneurs in the room, there's a lot of opportunity to make a difference here. I don't want to be all down. I don't want to be all sour grapes here. There's a dynamic disruption, a dynamic innovation that's happening that we can all get involved with.
Hi, Michael. My name is Sheng. I'm 23 and a relatively recent graduate of UC Berkeley. And I totally agree with most of the things that you do say. And myself, I've gone through a Fortune 500 company as well as 2 startups in just the last 2 years. But my question, but at the same time, I realize that we're very fortunate to be in the Silicon Valley in San Francisco, where it is a hotbed of innovation. However, what about the rest of America, kind of like middle America, or even within California? Bakersfield probably has less opportunities to network as well as other opportunities than San Francisco. So I guess, what is your advice for young people in those areas that might not have such great opportunities as the Silicon Valley?
Great question. So, I live in New York. I travel here a lot to the Bay Area. You can get in this bubble in New York, Bay Area, where everyone is an entrepreneur team. And I would just go back to, for the rest of America, I would just go back to the studies I cited, which showed that job creation comes from startups. So yes, we have this wonderful startup economy here and in New York, and in some ways it's overheated, right? There's almost another tech bubble happening right now in the Bay Area. But there's a lot of places where there's not an entrepreneurial bubble at all. And we need startups in Detroit. The GM is not going to create jobs in Detroit. We can just accept that one as settled, right? So who is going to create them? Startups, small businesses, maybe not fancy social media apps, but a startup doesn't have to be a social media app. It can be a startup of a local business. And now also with the internet, anyone who can afford an internet connection has access to a global market. And there's all kinds of stories now of 15-year-olds. I interviewed a lot of them, I know 15-year-olds starting profitable businesses from their bedrooms. And there's a great phrase from Daniel Pink, who's an author who's written a lot about this. He calls it digital Marxism. And the idea is that when this country was being founded, most people were, and it was mostly men back then, most people were small businessmen, right? The butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, right? And so you had these small businesses and entrepreneurs, more or less, who were creating the economy. And then what happened is the means of production, to use Marx's term, became so expensive that the candlestick maker and the butcher and baker couldn't own them anymore. And you had these large factories that had to be owned by corporations, and the workers became interchangeable units who could just be plugged in. They were the labor that fueled the factories. And what's happening now is that for certain sectors, the means of production, to use that phrase again, have once again become within the hands of one person. So you're seeing this huge boom in micropreneurialism, self-employment, flexible work from home, all these options that people can use, not just in San Francisco, not just in New York, but everywhere to create opportunity for themselves.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we've reached a point in our program where we have time for only one more question. I'm sorry, but Michael will be around to answer questions afterwards and to sign books, which we do have for sale out in the lobby. I would like to remind our audience listening at home, this is the Commonwealth Club of California. Our program tonight is Daniel Ellsberg and the College of Industrial Science. Daniel Ellsberg's son. I heard that one day. Ellsberg's most famous son, Michael Ellsberg. I'm very sorry. I was looking right at his father. Our program tonight is Michael Ellsberg, and we do have time for one last question. Are you on it?
Thank you very much, Michael. I really enjoyed your talk and your book. My question is, you didn't so much address this, but it sort of touched upon, not only is higher education struggling, but also beginning in kindergarten, we're having failing school problems. So if part of your premise is that we need to really teach people to be lifelong learners and create networks that aren't just through these hallowed halls and institutions, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about if you have envisioned how that looks, maybe for people more in Middle America, not from privileged backgrounds, who have networks that are outside of the schools anyway, or who have educated parents, how to sort of start that disruptive technology revolution and get it there.
Great question. So this is about, I think mostly talking about kind of the ambitious, the elite of people and what they should be doing. So this is about the everyone, the 99%, as the occupiers are saying. And again, this system trains young people. We have a system where everyone is going towards the ideal of getting into Harvard, right? Even the people, not everyone's going to get into Harvard, obviously, but even the people who aren't going to get into Harvard are being trained into this ideal of academic perfection. And so if everyone is being put through the same curriculum to the same end, and think of how much diversity there is out there. Think of how many different ways there are to contribute. Think of how many different ways there are to make a mark, to serve others. One way is to be a professor, to study things, to disseminate knowledge, to advance learning, and that does make a mark. But we act as if that's the only way. We essentially train all young people in America to become professors. It's an insane system. Only the people who are going to become professors, and I think that shouldn't be based just on IQ or SATs or whatever. There should be kind of farm teams going out, finding the people who really have talent. They should be training for that. But think of all the other ways there are to make a difference that people could be learning about and should be learning about from a young age. From starting organizations, getting involved in communities, starting businesses, learning all kinds of different skills that are related to providing value. I think, in closing, I'll say that the fundamental thing that people should be learning if they want to create economic opportunity for themselves, is they should do a deep dive into the study of value, how to create value. And I can say from experience, having gone through the system, that in that system you don't create very much value, right? Has anyone read a book of student papers written by undergraduates? There's not a lot of work up to the undergraduate and through the undergraduate level that's really creating a lot of value for anyone out there. Whereas you can learn, the tools are in people's hands to learn how to start businesses that do create value in the community, to get involved in movements that create value, to be creating art. I mean, we're cutting art funding, we're cutting all kinds of music funding. There's so many different ways to be creating value, and we're cutting 80 or 90% off of them to straitjacket people into this narrow, test-based academic system. And I really hope you'll all join me in changing that system. Thank you so much.
Okay, I would like to thank our speaker, Michael